What's up everybody, Brett here, bringing you back for some more Total War Warhammer 2 2v2 action. Going to be playing as the Court of Liberos today with the Tomb King's Queen Khalida, and I'm going to be having a very synergistic build with her. My ally is going to be playing as the Skaven, and our opponents are going to be the High Elves and Vampire Council. Let me slow it down so we can get into this, the army breakdowns, and I also want to say that my purpose for casting this game today is twofold. One, hopefully showing you guys a good game with a lot of various units that you don't get to see a lot in the current meta. And two, to talk about something that is important to me, and I've talked about it before in some of my other games, and that is being polite to your opponents as well as to your allies. So I've showed you a game in the past where one of my opponents was it was a pretty disparaging game to have played. Everything from pulling race cards out to countries of origin to try and insult me while he was cheesily kiting me. That's not a good feeling, and this one was unfortunately an ally on ally bit of harassment, which frustration is understandable, but team chat is there for a reason. If you want to help your ally make a good decision in a battle like this, just communicate. Not everyone is a pro player. Most of the people who play 2v2s and free-for-alls and things, they go to these types of battles because they are newer players. And if you are an experienced player, it's kind of your responsibility to make sure that you're helping the newer player on your team. And I'm going to go ahead and let's break down the army comp. Now, my entire build was based around High Queen Khalida and her passive ability, the Blessing of Asaph. So, in the lore, Asaph is kind of an Egyptian-themed god of the Tomb Kings. Queen Khalida is dying from poison, and Asaph brings her back. That's my understanding of the lore. So she kind of has this affinity for poison, and very fitting that she rides one of these Necro Serpent construct mounts. An incredibly cool looking model, and you see here even her staff is something like a living snake. But with the Blessing of Asaph, the build revolves around her sitting very near to any type of range unit and applying those armor piercing, missile damage increasing, reload skill buffs. And it's a pretty small AoE. She needs to be very close to the range units. And you'll see here she's sitting right in a pocket with a bone giant. Excellent artillery piece that doubles as a melee construct. Does magic damage. Very good range, 350, not bad. And just huge, pretty accurate missile projectile that it does shoot against large targets. And we'll see him get a lot of good hits this game. Also, Ushabti Great Bows. Kind of the Swiss Army knife of the Tomb King's roster. Excellent skirmishing from them. They can move quite quickly. So you can get them into position with 255 range. They'll do heavy armor piercing damage, and then you just run them back behind the lines. We also took a Lich Priest with the Lore of Nehekara, looking to just make use of Skull Storms as well as very cheap spells to proc the passive map-wide healing on our Skeleton Spearmen, so we can get the most of them in this fight. And we just took very cheap Skeleton Spearmen, King Nikesh's Scorpion Legion, poison variant. I thought it was just thematic with Queen Khalida to have a poison-based army, and it was quite fun. 3 units of Skeleton Archers, one of them being the Blessed Legion of Fatah, something like that. I think the more accurate way to say this sounds closer to a curse word, and I'm going to leave that one alone. But they have armor sundering is their big differential. Very powerful, putting them in the center of my army so that they have a very large range of options on who to target with that armor piercing. And here's the unit I was very excited about showcasing. Let's go ahead and stop it so we can just admire their models for a second, because you almost never see these guys. The Sepulchral Stalkers, and I know how to say that word, believe me, but I knew if I went to say it out loud, I would mess it up. But these guys are armored, armor piercing, anti-large, and they can Vanguard deploy. So that's me reading their tooltip there. But all those things are very true, and I think people forget just how strong they are against large. They do have armor piercing and poisonous missile damage. So this is what makes these guys unique. Only 80 range, only 3 ammunition. It does do magic damage, but it applies poison and it does quite a bit of magic damage. You can either sit them behind a front line, and let's say you're playing against the Empire and they like to charge Reichsguard right up the center, crush your puny skeleton front line. These guys right behind them, if you use them to mirror any sort of heavy cav, they're very good at crushing them. They'll also poison them and kill quite a few models before the engagement even begins. Yeah, I like to use them to mirror heavy cav, and my thinking here was that they would be effective against something like Dragon Princes, and yeah, just keeping them high and tight with Khalida for now, and we'll see how the enemy moves and how we seek to engage with them. My Skaven ally went very wide on the front line. I like it. Lots of Skaven slave spears. Good choice. If they have to fight a large target, they'll do a little bit of damage before they break and run away. Very cheap. Some clan rats with shields, plague monks mixed in. So a nice alternating front line. Few chevrons on these guys. They're getting some nice buffs. Yeah, so nothing too fancy. No censor bears here, just standard plague monks mixed in with a plague priest. And the Lord option is going to be Lord Skrolk. So very solid Lord option. Going to be casting a lot of blessings with filth this battle, giving a poison buff to the front line. He also took Liber Bubonicus and Rod of Corruption, so 2 very good AoE damage over time abilities that Skrolk is kind of known for. And for those of you who aren't perhaps familiar with the models, let's try and get a look at him while he's hiding in and amongst his troops. He's going to be the guy with the big book on his back, the blind, plague-ridden rat. And so a single unit of warp fire throwers. Let's go into slow-mo so we can kind of watch their animations. There we go. Check these guys out. One of them has the tank on its back, and the other one shoots the flame. They're devastating if you can get them on this kind of a slope, firing into the right target. And maybe the MVPs this battle are the Warp Lightning Cannons. They're going to have a lot of targets. Our opponents brought 3 different dragons and lots of units weak to magical damage. And they're also on a very powerful slope here, perhaps the best line of sight on this map. Some Storm Vermin and Halberds on the defensive here, standing right behind the artillery. I love the color scheme on these guys when you take Clan Pestilence. I also forgot to mention that I do have the Kepra Guard. So it's the Regiment of Renowned Tomb Guard unit. They're dual-wielding swords. They're meant more for infantry fighting. They're more offensive than defensive, as the Tomb Guards often are. They have regeneration innately, so they're kind of like the Stearnsmen in that way. They will fight to the end. Now, our opponents didn't look like they wanted to move. We had the artillery advantage, so obviously we did not want to move. But the last thing I want to do is showcase a stalemate type of game for you guys. That's not very fun. So I was more than willing to move off of this high ground position to engage them in more open field. As was my ally, thankfully. But we're both experienced players. We know how to micro our armies in and out and maintain formation. So we see them moving as we move. So I decide first, I believe, to settle back into my original formation. And I think he's going to make some adjustments as well. So very quickly, the Vampire Count's formation is non-existent. And that's because they decided to take Manfred von Karstein, strip down a bit on his zombie dragon. Very cool looking model the dragon is. There's Manfred the Bald Master on his glorious mount. But he's going to try and get off some Winds of Death, some Invocations of Nehek. I'm not sure if I saw any zombie summonings this game. The Claw of Nagash, the Regiment of Renowned Mortis Engine. You know, I think the idea here was to mix in 4 Karn rates. Yeah, take a second to soak that in. 4 Karn rates, plus 2 of the Hex rates. So nothing but ethereal units for the Vampire Counts there. So the idea was to mix them in and amongst the Claw of Nagash to take advantage of the healing, perhaps stack Invocation of Nehek as well as the buffs and healing from the Claw of Nagash, and make just a really strong ethereal pocket that only magic damage, very powerful magic damage, could have broken, as well as the vampire with the Lore of Shadows. And I see here they have taken the, let's see if I can get it. If I pause it, can I get it? There we go. Got to get right on her till she disappears. The Sword of Anti-Heroes, going to make her a little bit better in melee. And vampires, of course, regen. She also took Dark Benediction, giving leadership in an AoE. That's very good if you're taking a low leadership chaff type units, as well as the Pendulum, which is an excellent AoE spell. Goes down a straight line, and it's pretty beautiful visually. So yeah, that's it for the vampire counts units, and he's hiding them in the trees because, well, I mean, it was actually a pretty smart move to do so. With the Warp Lightning Cannon's magic damage as well as the Bone Giant, had we been able to see these guys, we would have been picking them apart quite easily. The High Elf player went a more traditional build, lots of Spearmen in the front line, looks like 5 units in total, as well as 2 units of Lothern Seaguard. I like that. They're very utility-focused unit, able to double as Spearmen in a pinch. A single unit of Swordmasters of Hoeth, not bad. You really want to have a unit like this in your army roster. We can zoom in for you guys who've never seen how cool these units look. Awesome. Just thousands of years old badasses of the High Elves. You want to have a unit like them, at least one expensive can opener unit for dealing with heavy armored infantry, as well as a single unit of the White Lions. Another more armor piercing focused unit. You'll see here they march in kind of a loose formation, making them slightly better against range fire. And both of these units, despite not having a shield tooltip, are somewhat shielded versus missile damage. They do have innate missile damage. Also took 2 units of Silver Helms, so would be decent at circling around our formations, getting into the back lines here. They are not the shielded version. They're kind of a mid-tier cavalry, for those of you who aren't familiar. Their stats are okay, but once they lose martial prowess, see if we can get on this. There we go. Once they lose the 12 melee defense and the 2 melee attack they get from martial prowess, once their HP drops below 50%, I mean that 12 melee defense is just, it just makes them so easy to kill. Any low tier infantry can do well against the Silver Helms, unfortunately. They do have decent charge bonus of 60, but that's not really enough to save them. So we have a Moon Dragon here and a Sun Dragon. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the Moon Dragon has a breath attack that is very good against large targets, and you can use it to snipe out lords, artillery pieces, monsters. And the Sun Dragon is better against infantry blobs. Now don't get me wrong, a Moon Dragon breath attack on an infantry blob will do a ton of damage, but a Sun Dragon attack against something like, let's say, a Bone Giant is not going to do nearly as much as the Moon Dragon's breath attack. And also let's see here, the Moon Dragon has almost 1,000 more HP, and the Sun Dragon, let's see, they have 15 more charge bonus. So in the lore, the Sun Dragons would be like the younger dragons, the Moon Dragons would be like the middle-aged dragons, and the Star Dragons are the ancient ones. And last but not least, a choice that I often make is the Princess for the High Elves. A stripped down, well, I'm not going to say it like that, a princess with none of her abilities, and I see here she does have one of her abilities. Let's pause it and see if we can, there we go. So she does have Loose, so looking to get some reload skill on herself and her Lothern Seaguard brethren. I probably wouldn't even have taken that. I think unless you're really building around this, it's not necessary. But I know that without a mount and without any of her abilities, she costs 950 gold. Super cheap. A Tyrion, you know, on his special steed with Sunfang and, you know, Heart of Avalorn and all those things, he's in the 2,000 plus range. So for the price of a Tyrion, a souped up Tyrion, you can get a cheap princess. You could get and probably like 2 White Lions of Krace. So you really have to ask yourself, how wide do you want to go? And the High Elf player wanted to go pretty wide here. So without any further ado, I think we can go ahead and let this kick off. And we're going to be taking advantage of our artillery superiority here. The Warp Lightning Cannons are going to start doing their business and just devastating the first units that we're able to hit. There is a bit of a line of sight issue. There are some hills here, so a lot of our units don't have the kind of arc needed to go over these. Were these Plague-Claw catapults, they would simply just fire over and we wouldn't be obstructed whatsoever. But unfortunately the High Elf players kind of inadvertently, wow, that's devastating, moving their army in these very straight lines parallel to our artillery, and they're going to be taking a lot of damage because of that. Manfred's here circling around, and they're going to be looking to micro their units to dodge these artillery pieces, and that's effective a lot of the time, especially with dragons. Their speed is almost good enough to reliably dodge these types of attacks. So at a moment here, we're going to start switching our artillery on to more effective, larger targets. But at this point, we haven't seen all of these Cairn Wraiths and Hex Wraiths yet. So we're not quite sure where the Vampire account's gold has gone into. And we're going to be shifting our formations just a little bit here. The Skaven has taken the initiative of defending our front line. And I'm going to saturate with my Spearmen, Kepler Guard. And I want to make sure that I have adequate protection on my flanks. I don't know what Manfred's going to do here. I was expecting something like a Wind of Death into our archer units, but I'm positioning very defensively. Now, let me slow it down just to talk about what they should be doing in a circumstance like this. Okay, so we have the range superiority. We have the high ground position. So the only thing you can do if you're the other player is to advance. Now, the Vampire Accounts player in our all chat was yelling at his teammate to advance, and he should have. He honestly should have. Now, did our opponents have much of a chance of winning this game? Certainly, but it required more coordination than they were able to muster. So the High Elf player is going to sit back here without anything near the ability that we have to skirmish, and look to skirmish us with these 2 Lothern Sea Guard. And that's just not going to be effective. So the Bone Giant and the Ushabti are taking shots at Manfred, and you'll see we're doing tons of damage here. Boom, big shot there from the Bone Giant. And the Warp Lightning Cannons have just dumpstered the Claw of Nagash with a single volley. They have taken it nearly out of the fight. One more volley should do it. And you'll see there the Sepulchral Stalkers were able to get off one of their poisonous volleys onto Manfred, long enough to slow him, and when he's slowed by the poison, his speed was 23 there. So that's enough to make him very easy target for all of our Ushabti and Bone Giant play. So he's going to have to pop a lot of invocations of Nehek to get himself back to full. Nice breath attack there from the Sun Dragon. Plague Monks are certainly a good target for that. I like my ally strategy here of using Skaven Slave Spears to just soak up ammunition to maybe make the High Elf player think twice about running in. And as long as we're sitting back, we're winning this fight. You'll see here the Vampire Accounts player hasn't even thought about moving his units from the forest yet. And they're trying to take advantage of this lip here to defend themselves against the very straightforward fire from these Warp Lightning Cannons. But as long as they have large targets on the field, like these Silver Helms and these dragons, we're going to have a target. And I'm using the mobility of the Ushabti Great Bows to position them wherever I need them to, so that I can get that fire going. They still have a ton of their ammunition. We've already done a ton of damage, and gotta love the animation here. Bam, direct hit on the Moon Dragon. I was taking shots at him because he wasn't moving. Let's see if we can get another view of their animation. Beautiful. And yeah, we're going to be taking out the Lothern Sea Guard. These are not the shielded variant. And they're not going to have a good time trading with Ushabti. Ushabti want to be firing at large armored targets, but wow, if you want them to, they can just go ahead and tear apart other skirmishers, other missile units, and it's just devastating. Every time they hit, they kill models. And you'll see I've been keeping Khalida back here with the warp lightning cannons and with my skeleton archers, and I moved the bone giant a little bit. Let's see, where's Khalida? She's right here. For the most of the battle, I kept her right next to the warp lightning cannons to give them huge damage, armor piercing, and better reload speed. So expecting them to come forward, I moved her near to the front lines, near to the bone giants, warp fire throwers, as well as these two archers, but they just did not advance. And this is where I'm sure the frustration of the Vampire Counts player came in. I mean, they're just sitting here and taking all of this fire. And while it's very fun for us, we're in like a shooting gallery here, just picking targets and tearing them apart. It's certainly not fun for the guy who brought the cheese army of Hex Wraiths and Cairn Wraiths. So here the princess is taking some shots. She's up to 13 kills. She was shooting at some Skaven slaves earlier, and now she's taking shots at Skrulk. Not really getting any damage. She is somewhat protected behind this slope. Nice hit there. But in the meantime, you know, bone giants raining in fire, devastating these lines. Missed a pretty sweet shot here. I wish I would have got for you. But I switched my bone giant in the last second to the Swordmasters of Hoeth, and it took out a perfectly straight line. Just went right down and killed all like 4 models, I believe it was. 3 or 4 models, and put them here. Keeping them in the back was smart. They're much harder to hit when they're further down behind this slope. Ushabti are still firing. They still have somewhat decent ammunition left. And at this point, they're finally deciding to engage. It's a little too late. Our front lines are in perfect health. Our artillery pieces have gotten all their value. I've decided to switch my Ushabti onto 2 different spearman units. Very good possibility that I would be able to break both of them were I to continue that fire, or at least put them down to something like half health before they were able to engage, making them virtually not effective. But he did also decide to park his silver helms here and leave them, so I switched targets to the large armored targets of the silver helms. More beautiful lightning, warp lightning cannon shots coming in. And the dragons, even now, they're just fighting slave spears. That's not what they want to be doing. Manfred's been using all of his wisdom magic to heal himself, as opposed to his blobbed up ethereal army. And he's already at his healing cap. So that's not boding well for them. Now finally, the enemy is within range of my archers. And to be honest, we could have played that even harder on our opponents. We could have really kited them, moved forward a lot of things, and screened and done a lot of fancy stuff. But they were having trouble dealing with what we were doing already. So I didn't feel the need to make it any more unfun than it probably already was for them. The Cairn Wraiths are moving in and taking all of that magic damage from the lightning cannons. I'm going to get a Skull Storm here in the back with my Lich Priest, and he's going to pick up just 9 kills on the first one, but I do believe I get another one in a moment. Lots of magic damage going down on these guys. The warp fire throwers are shooting from the pocket here. Queen Khalida and Skrulk are getting in. The Bone Giant is now out of ammunition. He's going to be going after the Vampire, the Lore of Shadows. Beautiful battlefield here. Let's take a slow-mo. Wind of Death. Oh man, what a terrible cast. He basically Wind of Death his own units. Missed the Plague Monks completely. And ends up getting a unit of Skaven Slave Spears who were already breaking, and then killing off a ton of these Spearmen for the High Elves. So really unfortunate cast from Manfred, who is just getting gunned down by the remaining ammunition that I have on my Ushabti. The remaining Lothern Sea Guard are firing into the Warp Fire Throwers. Not a bad choice. The Princess has taken the high ground and she's going to be firing in. But we have the front line covered with lots of cheap options. My Skeleton Spearman and the Kepler Guard. We can check this fight out. Speed it up. The Kepler Guard have some pretty sweet animations as well. Dual wielding, fighting these spearmen and white lions, pushing them back. Lots of fire from my skeleton archers coming in here. This moon dragon is looking to get in the background, the back lines rather, and I'm going to be splitting up some of my rear defensive units to try and help defend our cannons, who are almost out of ammunition anyway. But he's going to seek to turn and start taking out one of my archer units. And it's very important that when you have multiple ranged units, you can split them up and have them take different positions. One unit can only go after one unit. So while that dragon would be attacking any number of these targets, it's important that the other ones are split and continue firing. And you'll see here the Cairn Wraiths just get dumpstered. The Hex Wraiths are coming in, but it's too little too late. All of the Hex Wraiths are going to die. The Vampire of Shadows is going to die. And that's because I believe Manfred got shot out of the sky a moment ago. And there he is. He didn't even make it off the battlefield. Queen Khalida managed to use some of her skills. When the Hex Wraiths got in, I used her... Slow it down for a second. I used her ability, Venom Wave, which is kind of an AoE explosion that does very powerful magic damage. Yeah, and just some crumbling here from the Hex Wraiths. They never even made it into combat. A second Skull Storm went off, getting a lot more kills on the Sword Masters of Hoeth. Yeah, just a lot of our units are in top health, and here he gets into my archers, and I'm going to be splitting them up in a second when I recognize the danger here, and there they go. Realm of Souls proccing, giving me some healing on my front line. I was buffing this unit of spearmen here because they were in such a tough fight, giving them a 44% physical resistance with the Lore of Nehekara. And that's the only reason these spearmen outlasted Sword Masters of Hoeth as well as a unit of spearmen. So excellent job from my ally there, helping to hold the front line, helping to win the artillery engagement. Our build had a lot of synergy, and Queen Khalida does that with her ranged focus passive. You'll see here a good bit of kills on these dragons, but those were all just Skaven Slave Spears. Swordmasters of Hoeth got a lot of kills, but those were just skeletons. Very unfortunate. The person, honestly, who was complaining the most was the Vampire Counts player, and this is not a witch hunt on Wraith Red as Blood. I'm sure he was just frustrated, but it's worth remembering in the times of frustration in any online game that your ally is your teammate, and you'll win or lose by your ability to help them. And had he perhaps proposed a strategy instead of yelling at him in team chat, they might have been able to make some sort of concerted effort. These Hex Wraiths might have gotten to our back lines. These Cairn Wraiths might have mixed well with the High Elf Spearmen and decimated our low tier infantry, which they probably would have. Plague Monks, I think, do magic damage, so they might have been effective against the Hex Wraiths. But regardless, they had a chance, and just a little bit of coordination would have helped them a lot. So the takeaways here are, be good to your teammates, and that's point number one. And point number two is just, if you want to win games, take advantage of your terrain. Take advantage of any synergies between builds that you're able to develop. Queen Khalida is a good example of that, taking advantage of the range synergies. And we were able to, just through our experience playing together, kind of know what each other was going to do. And yeah, Warp Lightning Cannons, great kills. I would be very curious to play this battle again, but this time have the High Elf player and Vampire Count player charge us, and then to see how the battle would go. I'd be very interested to see how that would change everything for this battle. Well, alright guys, my name is Brett. My channel is Good Talk Gaming. If you like the video, please hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be making videos for a while, and if you enjoy them, subscribing is a good way to let me know that. Comment if you haven't already. Let me know, if there's anything you would have done differently. And feel free to share any stories you have about, honestly, bad experiences in the, not even just the Total War community multiplayer, which, to be honest, I've had quite a few bad experiences. But if you have any bad experiences, any multiplayer games in general, let me know in the comments how you deal with that. I'd be very interested to know. So alright guys, y'all have a good day, and I will see you in the next one.